Hello everybody. Still have some hardy souls here. Who's hungry? Yeah. Okay. So, when I found out I was going to be doing this presentation, the last of 15, I thought it isn't fair on me or you for me to talk for 20 minutes, so I'm not going to. The good thing about that is, because I'm going to play some video clips, I can actually chop one or two out. So I'm going to try and claw back the time we've lost. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, so the rising US market and trends. So 2 years ago at Summit, I gave an initial talk, and it was actually called the Emerging US Market. And back then, we had 9 US states that had legislated online gambling for sports betting. And we said at the time we didn't know how quick that was going to grow, how the effect on our business and the effect on the wider industry. So this really is an update session on where that's at, and also look at some key trends. And as I said, rather than me tell you about them, we're actually going to get some of the US operators to do that for us, if it works. If it doesn't, we get lunch even earlier. So, okay, so I think most people know who Consonate are. We're a global ISP serving predominantly the online gambling industry, but adjacent markets too. We offer connectivity, managed services, security services in now more than 80 locations across the world. And you can see a number of our customers there. But the US then, so right now the situation in the US is that we have 29 states either regulated or just passing legislation at the moment. And gross gaming revenue is now over 4 billion annually. The last summit when I spoke, it was 1 billion. So that's just the growth in 2 years. For us, though, as a service provider to that industry, it's been particularly challenging, as you can imagine, because that map now, where all the red states are regulated, is, we've had to be before the first movers. And what we've found is that servicing first movers is particularly difficult. Every state in the US is essentially like a European country. And they all have their own legislation. They all move at different paces. They all have a different approach to licensing. And so what that's meant for our business is that we've had to be before the first movers, which has given us particular growth challenges, etc. But right now, we're in almost all of the live states, and we've got another 5 to deliver by the end of this year. In terms of the trends then, there's obviously rapid growth in the US, and the graph on the right there shows where we are going to be predicted at the end of 2022, which is just over 30 states with licensing in place. So one of the trends you'll see specific to the US is about first mover. Every operator wants to be the first mover in that state, and so when a state regulates, it could be a matter of weeks before the first operator goes live. And then, so there's, in that race for the few weeks, we have to be there before them, then they have to move in, they have to set up their infrastructure, then they go live. That is not unlike how things were in Europe, but it's at a much accelerated pace. And there are state-by-state regulatory challenges, so not every state does things in the same way. There are challenges with geolocation, there are challenges with KYC, and navigating the Wire Act, which has been a particular challenge in the US as well. So there are some trends that are specific to the US market, which is making it difficult to set up shop, not least the cost of market entry. A lot of operators are finding it particularly expensive to enter the US market. But taking us to the video clips, really, there are a number of trends in the US which are actually the same trends that have been talked about here today. We've talked about M&A, we've talked about the pandemic, product innovation, etc. And so, which takes us to our video clips. Last week we actually played out this webinar, which is a number of the biggest US operators talking about the current challenges for them. So what I did, the whole clip actually is over an hour long. I just picked out a few small clips of what I believe was most relevant to this audience, on a number of topics. So the first topic is M&A. So we've talked a little bit about M&A here today. And to kick it off here, this is Mark Brody, who's VP of Business Development at Bally's. There's obviously a strong local connection there because they now own GameSys. So he's going to talk a little bit about what he views the M&A market to look like, if it works.
Our company has been one of the most active in the M&A space since the pandemic began. It actually started with the acquisition of BetWorks, which was a company that I helped co-found. And since then, we've taken Bally's, which really didn't exist almost 2 years ago, and we have acquired several land-based casinos, several acquisitions in the gaming space, Sport Caller, notably on the free-to-play side, Monkey Knife Fight on the daily fantasy side. And, we saw an opportunity during the pandemic to basically, in a very short time, create one of the larger gaming footprints in the United States. And that led us to the acquisition of GameSys, which was, completed this week. And now, globally, we sit with the third largest footprint in the United States on the casino side, and with the combined entity of GameSys, we are a global operator now. In respect to whether or not we're going to see consolidation enough to the point where we get to a big two or a big three, I hope not. And I think that it's best for the industry if you have multiple options for customers across the spectrum. And even though we see some of the bigger players out there, ourselves included, garnering up more and more technology, garnering up more and more market access, I don't think you'll ever get to a point where there is a Amazon of sports betting or gaming, or some type of monopolistic corporation that can come in, only because I think consumers want variety, and I think that the current landscape really offers consumers a compelling spectrum of products that some consumers might like traditional sports betting, just pre-match, and on the other end of the spectrum, new technologies like Alex and Sport Trade in the, what I'll call kind of a derivatives market play is very interesting to a new generation of game player and sports bettor. So I think what we'll see in, the coming year and a half is more investment into the space, because to points that I made earlier, we're still nascent. There's still plenty of growth here. The largest states in the United States, California, Florida, New York, Texas, are not open or are open with limited access. So as the community grows of our player base, the companies will continue to grow. And I think that'll, kind of hold off massive consolidation that you're alluding to.
And so the second clip is actually very related to what we've talked about here today. Almost every presentation has touched on the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has affected their business. In this clip, Yaniv Sherman from 888 talks about how 888 have adapted and the particular challenges that they've seen.
It's almost hard to believe, but we're lapping the second year of this event. And, what started off as a fire drill for 9 global locations and about 1,700 people, and all of a sudden we're sort of taking it in stride. So I think the main our main lesson or adjustment was to remain agile. I think as an industry, the online industry had the benefit of or the ability to adapt relatively quickly. We don't have a lot of real estate. We don't have, most of us, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees that need to be furloughed or handled. So we could adjust, and work from home became the new, or hybrid became the new model. But going forward, I think what we're focused on right now is preserving the DNA that got us to where we are. That DNA is very important. The company has traditionally been, although we're 1,800 people, and now with a recent acquisition in William Hill, we're about to become much bigger. But doing all that inside a pandemic, and it's pretty clear it's here to stay in the foreseeable future. Just people spoke about the structural shift in consumer behavior. There's also a structural shift in the employment market. People who we hire spend now almost 2 years without physically being in the room with their colleagues. Building teams remotely is a different art form, and we're trying to get to that balance between health and safety of the employees, but also providing them with, we call every new an aidster, providing them or making them an aidster, and that bestowing that DNA globally. It is a challenge, but we have more tools at our disposal, and I think that is our focus, because any company, and gaming companies are no different than any other one, they're tested when they need to scale, and now we need to scale because of that digital structural shift, and you can only scale through people. You can scale technology, you can scale resources, but people is the hardest part to scale, especially when their connection into the organization isn't that trivial, when they don't arrive into an office or not as frequent, and they don't interact with one another. So I think that is the biggest challenge, I would say, in the near and midterm, is preserving that, or inventing new DNA that they could plug into, because preserving momentum during the pandemic was easier than starting things anew. Everybody here, I think, on the call can see what the challenge is, and if someone's setting up a company in this atmosphere, pushing something from a standstill position is a lot harder when you have to do everything remotely, at least from our experience.
I think we can all relate to some of that in our businesses here. So I'm only going to play one more clip to try and get us back on track. And this one is related to esports. Again, something that's been talked about quite a bit here today. And obviously there's quite an Isle of Man focus on. This one is Paris Smith, who's the CEO of Pinnacle. And she gives her thoughts on what esports betting might look like when it comes to the US.
I think, there needs to be a lot of education. People always refer to underage gamblers when it comes to esports, which makes no sense, because there's underage, we all have things in place with regards to KYC. It doesn't exist. It's the same exact situation for sports betting, which we call T-sports, as it is for esports. But the education for the regulators, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. And it's going to take a lot of effort and, just sharing that information, letting people understand that it's not about two kids in a basement betting. These are big, huge events. The internationals are coming in October. I think that event will be bigger than any Super Bowl or any U.S. final sport that there is. So the opportunity is massive. And it goes to what I was saying earlier, these companies that are consolidating and, doing such a great job with their experiences, they want to diversify. And in order to diversify, they're going to need to look at those esports players. And it's, they have the 4 or 5 big sports that they have, like GoSu, Counter-Strike, all the main esports themed sports that they offer. But there's new things, the mobile betting. Mobile esports is something, it's in Asia right now, but it's going to catch on into the US market. And that's a whole different diversity within the groups of young people that don't bet in a casino. It's going to be a real opportunity to capture an additional market. So I think, esports is going to come. It's going to come a bit slower, just the lack of knowledge, education, and information. But when it does start coming through and people understand what a great opportunity it is, not just for the profit perspective, but just from the diversification perspective, I think it's going to be huge when it gets going.
I think that was her dog in the background there. Okay, there are a couple of more clips on here, but I'm going to spare you those at the moment. If you want to catch the whole thing, it's just over an hour. Go to our website, consolidate.com. It really does give you a good insight into the US market and how the biggest operators are faring at the moment. To summarize, it is obviously it's a big growth area for us as a business. It is a big focus industry-wide, high cost of entry, and there are a lot of challenges related to that. But it's also very lucrative potentially too. With that, thank you very much.